modern life in general is conducive to noise, to paying attention to so many different things. And it seems to me that the core of the problem is just too much knowledge, too much access to information.
Yeah. Let's say you take up all of your time every day watching things that are technically educational. Well, those things are actually good. If you would learn something individually in each specific video, that is a good thing. But when you pile on 17 of those, then you've actually just wasted a whole lot of time. And by the end of number 8, I guarantee you that you don't remember what it was you learned in number 1. One of the problems of the modern age is that too much information is being put into the brain for it to properly be able to process, and so it short circuits, it breaks. And that's why we have smartphones and dumb people.
Ethan, what are we drinking tonight?
Well, I finished my Guinness, so I'm going to move on to the Quiet Man.
Back to the Quiet Man.
Which I still will say is the finest whiskey ever devised by human hands.
And you're double fisting this evening.
No, single fisting.
Well, you were double fisting.
I had them one at a time.
Okay.
Finish one before you start the other. It's not double fisting if you don't drink them at the same time.
It still is fitting with the shirt you're wearing, though. So, fatherhood, the toughest job you'll ever love.
It's something 100% true.
Exactly. And also means that having multiple drinks in an evening is, merited. You have earned it.
The best image that I can paint of a father of many children is several years ago, after Mass, meeting in the priest's house for breakfast. A whole bunch of us. All Catholic homeschooled families. And one father, who at that time only had 11, now has 13.
Okay.
Was sitting in the big easy chair. In one hand is a cup of coffee, and in the other hand is a glass of red wine. And when my dad pokes fun at him, he said, for that, saying, "Hey, you're two-fisting." He goes, "I am a father of 11. This is how I do it."
Mm-hmm. What do you need to get through life? Do you need an upper? Do you need a downer? I say both.
Have them both at the same time, it'll get you right in the middle.
Part of me wonders what coffee and wine together, like at the same time, would taste like. But
it's not bad. I had it once. It's actually not bad.
Really?
Depends on the coffee. Depends on the wine.
Okay. Remember, like, what type of wine and what type of coffee it was?
I remember it was red wine, and I had sugar in the coffee.
The sugar in the coffee would definitely help. So,
yeah,
you got that going for you. So, I come to you with a problem this evening, Ethan.
Mm-hmm. What problem is that?
The problem is that one of my bad habits for the past couple years, and I'm getting better at this, thank God, but still got a ways to go. I binge too many things.
Mm-hmm.
So,
well, you're not alone. I have that problem too.
There's been a number of times when I've been bored, particularly at work, in the past couple years. Not so much right now with the current state of things, which is helping. But the number of calls you get on an IT help desk is not always massive, which on one hand is a good thing because there were fewer problems that you have to solve and fewer problems people are facing.
Right.
But also means you have a lot of time on your hands. And so for quite a while, I fell into bad habits with just consuming too much YouTube and news and other things, and I needed to fill my time. And it became a vicious cycle of, gotta watch this, gotta do this. And it's just, the hamster wheel is going and going and going and going and going and going and going, and you're slowly going nuts. And not only are you slowly going nuts and getting more anxious, but at the end of it, you realize, I've just voraciously consumed a bunch of knowledge about various topics, and some of it has stuck. Like I've gotten a lot smarter financially as a result. But I also kind of feel like I just got spun out of a meat grinder. And I don't know, like I haven't retained what I ought to retain, and I've gotten dumber as a result. Or at least I feel this way. Now, I don't feel exactly that way now. I've slowed down my life a bit, and that's still a work in progress, and it seems like I can think better. But I'm not alone in that.
Mm-hmm.
It seems that modern life in general is conducive to noise, to paying attention to so many different things, and being stuck in that hamster wheel.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, that's my problem. How do I and other people solve it?
Well, I would say that the best solution is to spend as little time anywhere near the internet as possible. And I would also say, for one thing, something that I plan on doing is replacing this thing in the near future with something not anywhere near as smart. For one thing, that is, for me, usually happens when I go to the toilet. Is I wind up going to the toilet and I don't want to just sit there, because sometimes I'm going to be in there for a while. So, you bring your phone with you and you just scroll through your YouTube Shorts feed. And, before you know it, you're in there for 10 minutes longer than you need to, and both of your feet are asleep and you can't walk when you stand up.
Yeah, I know the feeling.
So, it's also a serious detriment to productivity, because when I want to sit down at my desk and write something, well, my phone is right there. And as our Lord has said, if your right hand causes you to sin, cut it off and cast it into the fire.
This is true.
If your eye causes you to sin, pluck it off and cast you in the fire. So,
Mm-hmm.
whatever it is that is drawing you closer to that habit should just go away and be gone forever. If it causes more problems than it solves. Because to be honest, if you have a computer, you don't need one of these. Nobody really does need one of these.
But I beg to differ. Like, of course we need both. Not that we intrinsically need both, but it's the way of the world, and it's like, yes, there are dumb phones, there are all these other things, and the idea behind them is really neat. And there are places and programs, or schools even, that make people give up their phones for a time or for something else. But it's just an intrinsic part of life, It's not like I just use my phone to make phone calls and text messages. I have probably too many apps on my phone, but the thing is, I use a lot of them.
Yeah, but would you still think you needed them? And would you still need to use them if you didn't have them? Do you use it because you have it, or do you actually use it because you need it? Because it is a necessity, and it is an absolute part of life. Is it a necessity the same way that food, water, shelter, and transportation are a necessity? Now, I'll grant that an internet connection is a necessity for life in the United States.
Mm-hmm.
I will grant that. The complete off-gridders are going a little too far. I'll grant that the internet connection is a necessity for communication, for entertainment, for whatever. Even for leisure, I can grant that an internet connection is necessary for those things. Because, as much as I love the hard copy of books, if your local bookstore doesn't have a book, you go to the internet and buy it. And order it and have it delivered. That kind of thing.
But what you've just done is you've admitted the practical necessity of the thing.
I've admitted the practical necessity of the internet connection, not the practical necessity of the smartphone. Because smartphones were not invented out of necessity. Smartphones were invented to create a convenience. Well, why would I have the computer when I can have it in my pocket? And if you can create a dumb phone that can keep up purely communication-wise with making calls and texting messages, if it can keep up with these things, and in a lot of cases they actually do them better because of how many other things the smartphone is designed to do, it doesn't do the making phone calls and sending text messages as well.
It seems to me that the core of the problem is just too much knowledge, too much access to information. Because when I get in the hamster wheel and I'm just spinning and spinning and spinning and spinning, yeah, I'm just consuming a bunch of things that are mindless. But it's information, and some of it can be turned to good. Like I said, I've gotten a lot smarter financially because it's been one of the byproducts of the hamster wheel. And that's been very good for me. But yeah, it's too much knowledge. It's too much noise. I don't know. What do you think of that?
Well, it's probably one of those situations where the thing itself is not bad. The thing itself may actually be a good. Because even if you are, let's say you take up all of your time every day watching things that are technically educational, well, those things are actually good. If you would learn something individually in each specific video, that is a good thing. But when you pile on 17 of those, then you've actually just wasted a whole lot of time. And by the end of number 8, I guarantee you that you don't remember what it was you learned in number 1. If it's an excess of stimulation, it is an excess of an influx of information. One of the problems of the modern age is that too much information is being put into the brain for it to properly be able to process, and so it short circuits, it breaks.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why we have smartphones and dumb people.
That's well said. The question could be asked, like, how did we get here? And we've talked in previous episodes about the Industrial Revolution, the speeding up of life, the way in which the aims of life were broadened out, that you can achieve so much more, but more and more people become part of the machine in order to do so. Not that working in a factory is a bad thing necessarily, or not that being part of big corporations is a bad thing necessarily, but things become less and less personal. We chose the title of our first episode, Human Relations versus Human Resources, for a reason. So, if human life is treated less and less as a living and loving adventure and more as a math problem, then it makes sense that more and more of human experience is reduced to consuming information. At least those are my own thoughts.
Everything these days seems to have become a product, and everyone these days seems to be labeled as a consumer. When information is the product and we are the consumers, we're not actually consuming it. Because what happens when you consume something? When you consume food, it eventually leaves the body.
Mm-hmm.
And it leaves the body in the form of crap.
This is true.
So when you have people that do nothing but consume information, that information leaves the brain in the form of crap. Most of the time.
Yeah, because what you consume matters, If you consume, healthy food, it builds you up. If you consume bad food, you might look a little bit too much like me.
Or me.
How?
You can say it, it's fine.
I said about myself. But yeah, if all you're doing is consuming information, yeah, you said it well. What was it like growing up for you there? Was this, I don't know, how did you, we got here to a point, modern society got here to a point, but what was it like growing up? Were there problems like this in your household?
Well,
granted, you're homeschooled, as was I, so we are abnormal to begin with, but it's still a valid question.
Caveat. But on top of being homeschooled, my household, I think, was even further abnormal. Because I was more near the sheltered end of the spectrum as far as everything went. So you should understand one thing is that my dad grew up very poor. Like my uncle was telling me, because my grandfather bought a house that at the time was basically useless because it was constructed for railroad workers, and there were basically 10 small studio apartments. Not even studio apartments. They were like half the size of a studio apartment in New York, if you can believe that. 10 of those with a shared bathroom in the middle.
Dang.
Basically 10 dorm rooms with a shower in the middle, or with a bathroom in the middle. And so my grandfather bought this house. I think my dad was 5 or 6 when he bought it. And my uncle, who was 3 years younger than my dad, told us that when he was in 3rd grade, he brought several friends home from school to show them their new shower. That was how big of a deal it was for them to have a shower. And my grandfather basically tore the inside of that house apart on his own and put it back together again. And it's a dear, sweet little house that I have some of my fondest childhood memories in. Like my grandfather did open concept with that house before it was a thing.
Hmm.
He made it an open concept house in like the 70s.
As a money
Which is
saving
about
thing?
20 to 30 years before like the uber rich people were like, we just need open concept. I need to be able to see my television from my kitchen. So my grandfather had already done that, and like I said, for my uncle, it was a big deal when they got a shower. And they otherwise grew up very, very poor. My grandfather worked multiple jobs, and that led my dad. There is a point to this. It is coming back around to your original question.
I
That
believe you.
what that did was teach. Growing up poor teaches you the value of money, but it also it can do something else to you as well. Because I remember when I was a kid, frequently asking for something and being told, "No, you don't need that," which I think almost everybody remembers being told when you're a kid. And either that or I'm not spending that X amount of money on whatever that is. But it's because my father grew up poor, and he knows the value of a dollar, and he knows the value of saving money. And now he's retired. He could retire. I think he was 53 when he retired, and he's doing fine
Mm-hmm.
because he knows the value of a dollar, and he only uses basically what he needs to live on, and all extra goes elsewhere. So that was basically the environment that I was raised in. So technologically, the only game system I ever had in my house when I was a child was a Nintendo GameCube that my brother and I got as a combo gift for Christmas one year. I think it was just a couple of years before the Wii came out, so it wasn't necessarily a new thing. But that was like a huge thing. That was like the only game. That was the only game console that we ever had. For perspective, the PS4 was out when I graduated high school. The Nintendo Switch came out second year of college, I think.
That sounds close enough.
That sounds right. I don't remember the exact details, but I was in college when the Nintendo Switch came out. And so, like, growing up, I was watching my friends have the Wii and the Wii U, and I had other friends that started with a PlayStation and had upgraded all the way to PlayStation 4 by the time I was going to college. And, the Xbox upgrades I was watching other people get, and my father wouldn't let me have any of it. And that's not a bad thing. But I was kind of technologically behind, which means that it also means that the first smartphone I ever owned, I was 18 before I owned one. And it was basically, and my brother was the same way. He's 4 years older than me, and he didn't own a smartphone until I think his sophomore year of college.
Mm-hmm. I was
And
pretty similar.
Because they make things easier, that was the argument I was able to use for my parents. Even then, when I went and got one, it was literally the cheapest one we could find. I think it was $100.
I think I may have
So it
gotten
was like on the lower end of the Galaxy. So my first phone, oh gosh, what was it? Which, by the way, this is my second smartphone. It was Samsung Galaxy A something, and this is the A51, I think.
Okay.
Which is basically when Samsung acknowledges, yeah, we don't need to make smartphones super fancy, so here's a less fancy model. That's the whole Galaxy A line. It's not as fancy, maybe not as fast, maybe not as streamlined, maybe it doesn't have as much storage space, not as good of a camera, whatever it is. It's fine.
Mm-hmm.
That's all stuff I can live with. This is my second smartphone ever in my entire life. And my fifth cell phone. Technically. So the first one was a track phone. It's basically a brick for those that know what track phone is. It was a prepaid. Now, I don't even know if they do that anymore. Having prepaid minutes. Now, if there happens to be anybody under the age of 30 watching this, 30 is too kind. If there happens to be anybody under the age of 25 watching this, a prepaid phone means that you go in every month and you pay for a certain number of minutes for every month, and that's how many minutes you have on your phone. You go to the counter, you pay for the minutes, they give you a little card that has numbers on it, you put those numbers in your phone, and then you have that number of minutes. And once you're out, it's gone. No more.
A number of people have forgotten about that unless they remember old commercials when they were a kid for, regarding minutes, or you don't need minutes. You would have to remember that.
And that counts that's your conversation minutes, and that's your text messages also counted for that. And phone companies used to charge, even on phone plans, they used to charge by the minute. Or for a certain number of minutes. You'd get a limit, and you go over that, and you have to pay more.
Mm-hmm.
Now, basically, everybody offers only unlimited plans. So there is kind of no point as to specifying that they're unlimited.
Mm-hmm.
But, again, kind of beside the point. My whole reason for saying this is that I didn't grow up with a constant influx of information. I only absorbed the information that I wanted to absorb when I wanted to absorb it. I didn't grow up with constant noise everywhere. We didn't have cable. We had a set of antenna sitting on top of the TV, which was a tube television. The first television in our house that I remember was from the 80s, and the one that's there now, that my parents currently have, is something that we had gotten from one of my dad's co-workers that he was getting rid of. That was from like the early 2000s, and it was already at least 10 years old when we got it. At the time, when it first came out, it would have been super fancy because it has both a VCR and a DVD player. Or maybe it just has the VCR attached, like as part of the TV itself, attached to it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember, but yeah, we didn't have lots of streaming services when all those first started up. I remember when Hulu was free and had ads. I remember that. I remember when Yahoo had a streaming service. Almost nobody cares about anymore. But it was free with ads. And that was basically how we watched television, and we watched it in the evenings. Usually after we prayed our rosary. Anything else, if I ever wanted to watch anything, I had to go and get a DVD or a VCR.
And so because there was a poverty of information in your life, you actually focused more on what mattered.
I wouldn't say it was a poverty of information. It was just
let's say a poverty of information compared to how many people would grow up.
I wouldn't call it poverty because it didn't cause me to suffer, but it was more of a and other than instead of being like a Niagara Falls of information, it was a little garden fountain.
Yeah, that's fair.
I don't get a whole lot at one time. I didn't get a whole lot at one time. But over time, it did fill me up
Mm-hmm.
with things that I would know. And there
No,
wasn't
it
constant
makes
stimulation
sense.
coming from every single corner of everything. Like to this day, I still despise it when I walk into a restaurant and no matter where you sit, there's a TV in view. I hate that. I didn't come to the restaurant to watch television. I came to the restaurant to eat.
As someone who is easily distracted by TVs and restaurants, especially used to be, yeah, we'd be better off. I'd be better off walking into an Applebee's and having 2 screens in there and not 10, or just
Yeah.
none. You know,
A restaurant should have no more than 2 screens over the bar. Maybe more if it's a long bar.
this conversation about your experiences growing up reminds me that, I mean, it wasn't just you growing up. That's how people generally used to grow up. If you get your information from the newspapers, then even if you are too voracious of a newspaper reader and you do it to ignore your family, like we talked about in the last podcast, like even then, you're consuming absolutely nothing compared to what so many people do today. And a way of reflecting that your conversation brought to mind is the difference between old houses and new houses. Now, if you have a new house, if you're a new modern person with a new house, it probably is more spacious than your grandparents' house was.
I can
It's
guarantee you
also,
that.
it's got a lot more stuff in it. There's a lot more you can do with that house, but it's also less interesting, in a sense. Like it's the same. We're not talking about architecture today, but it's the same modern architecture. It's probably a variant of some basic floor plan, and even if it's not, like, there's only so much variety between the rooms and such. And I'm reminded of the fact that the older houses are smaller, but they have character.
Mm-hmm.
And when I walk into a brand new home, or a new modern house today, like there's something cool and spacious about it. But it doesn't quite compare to the character of an old house. Like there's more character to my grandparents' house growing up, which I really like. And there's more character to. I'm reminded of this one golf course in Minnesota, where the clubhouse is just an old farmhouse,
Mm-hmm.
or seemingly an old farmhouse. If there was a farm once on the property, either way, it's an old house, and they've turned it into a clubhouse. They've done a good job, but there's still old carpet. There's still old furniture. There's an old organ in the, on one side of the room, and
Oh,
it's
that's
neat.
cool.
It's neat. It's got character. It's got a character and a soul that stuff lacks. But the reason that I compare this to knowledge and the proper consumption of it versus overconsumption is that when your things are simpler and smaller and you have fewer things, you focus on them more and you can make them better. I was listening to this one guy talk about how to grow a YouTube channel. And he talked about this very thing. Like, how do you learn, basically? And his approach was microskilling. So pick a skill, go deep on that skill, learn the skill. Now move on to the next. Now move on to the next. Now move on to the next thing. But don't be going at 10 at a time. And yet, far too many of us are not going at 10 at a time. We're going at 20 or 30 or 100.
So I would say try to learn no more than, if you're trying to learn skills, learn no more than 3 at a time. Maybe 5. Maybe.
Yeah.
If you have the energy for it. But I wouldn't. I would seriously limit how many skills you're trying to learn at one time.
This is true.
Because if you try to learn too many things at one time, it will overwork your brain, especially if they're so different that you have to use a different part of your brain for each one, which is the only way that you can learn a bunch of different things at one time, is if you have to use a different part of your brain for each separate thing.
Mm-hmm.
But if they're close enough together that you're using the same part of the brain, you try to learn 2 things at one time, or even 3 things at one time, your brain's going to fry. The best way to acquire knowledge is to take it slow. And I think this is a symptom of just modern impatience for everything.
Mm-hmm.
It's like nobody's willing to wait for anything. And I think that might have been one of the half-decent lessons of the COVID era, was that because the delivery services got so inundated with delivery orders, like Amazon no longer has 2-day shipping. Like Prime no longer guarantees 2-day shipping because now they just have so many people wanting to order stuff online, and they realize that, you know what, I think people would rather have to wait and expect to maybe wait a little bit beforehand, but then maybe be surprised, than be told, oh, it'll be there in 2 days, and when it's not there for a week, people get mad.
Sounds like I should move farther away from the Amazon distribution center that's like one town over. I recently
you
ordered
get
the
it like
wax.
the same day because everything's coming out of your distribution center. There was a couple things that we ordered that I don't know where the local distribution center is, but there were a couple of things that we ordered that were like, oh, it'll be there in 4 or 5 days, and it was there literally the next day. And we got a message like, good news, because you're close to the distribution center, it should be there today. And we're like, oh, great, that's wonderful. Better to be surprised by a short delivery than be pissed off by a delivery that takes a little bit longer than you were expecting.
Yep.
And I think that is one of the lessons of patience. Is it's better to be surprised by a quick solution, by something that happened faster than you expected, than to have to wait a little bit longer than you were thinking about and you thought you needed to wait.
Yeah, story from my own life. I recently ordered the Wax and Wayne books as part of the Brandon Sanderson Mistborn saga.
His best books, I don't care what he says.
Well, on the subject of over-consuming
I don't mean
information.
you, I mean Sanderson. He doesn't think they're his best books, but I certainly do.
Yeah, they were an experiment to him. A good experiment. I finished the first book in 2 days. But I ordered that set of books from Amazon, and they were like, you're going to have this by tomorrow night for free. And I'm like, okay, cool. Yeah, it was there. So, sub 24 hours. But to your point, like, this is one of the core things that we've talked about in this podcast. Like, you need to slow life down. To your point.
Yeah, and I think it's not necessarily the speed of life that is causing people to know too much and have too much information put in at the same time. I think it also has to do with the modernist idea of progress. Right. The modern idea of progress, which is that we're always going forward and always getting better and always improving and always learning and always gaining new knowledge, which is kind of the mantra of modern science. All of the modern science, modern philosophy too, but mostly modern science.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we're always learning new things and we're always gaining new science and we're always going forward. And nobody stops to, one, infrequently do they stop to actually make sure, yeah, this is right, and actually verify everything beyond a shadow of a doubt and beyond just the theory stage. This is another issue with science. There are too many things that are theory and are technically still theory that are just widely accepted as fact, because theory does mean something. Theory does have a definition, which is an idea that is moderately substantiated by evidence, which is nowhere close to the same as the definition of scientific fact, which is something that is immutable and substantiated by immutable and irreversible evidence that cannot be argued with. I know if I drop something on planet Earth, it will fall to the ground with a rate of acceleration of 9.81 meters per second squared. That is a law. That is a fact. And I know that. Evolution actually is still a theory because it has never progressed scientifically, according to the scientific method, past the stage of theory. Technically, neither has germ theory. Technically, neither has string theory. Yeah, I know, wild, isn't it?
By germ theory, you don't mean like an acronym. You mean germs, right?
Yeah.
I think that one's proven.
I'm not going to be saying that germs don't exist, because it is a proven scientific fact that there is bacteria and viruses. But the concept of germ theory, like, we shouldn't be calling it germ theory anymore because it's not a theory.
Well,
and germ is really just an umbrella term for tiny little things that may or may not cause diseases.
Well, to move beyond theory to scientific law, you require something science can't provide, which is faith. A reasonable faith. So
you need a reasonable faith, but you need an unreasonable faith to just believe a theory and accept it as a fact, which is what the entire world did when Darwin proposed the theory of evolution. Not been proven. It's not a scientific law. People just assumed it was right. And we'll get to that later on.
Fair enough.
People assuming that something is right because of who said it, or what it previously discounts, or why, or what it agrees with, because they have preconceived notions in their heads about other things. But one of the other issues of progress is that, and I think I've talked about this before, every old idea is just scrapped, thrown in the dumpster. We don't need it anymore, because now we have this new way of doing things. And we have this new way of doing things, so that must be better. Because now we're new, and everything is new, and everything is better, and the world is in a better shape now than it was 5 seconds ago. Because it's now, instead of being 5 seconds ago. Well, I don't know, in 5 seconds, 27 people could have been murdered. I don't know if that's better shape for the world to be in.
People forget the concept of, well, a couple things from Chesterton. People need to know more about.
Forget a lot of things from Chesterton.
Yeah. 2 things that they should steal from Chesterton are the concept of Chesterton's fence and what tradition is.
Yes.
So Chesterton's fence is, you see a fence, like a single section of a fence standing out in the middle of the field. And you wonder, why the hell is there a single section of fence standing out in the middle of the field? What you ought to do before taking down that section of the fence is do your diligence and figure out why it was actually put there. Even if it makes no sense, there might have been a reason. And pair that with Chesterton's brilliant description of tradition, which he describes as democracy of the dead. The dead get a vote.
The only way they can have their say.
Your ancestors get a vote. Life in this world is not all about you. You're just part of the journey. And you're a relatively small part. There's a reason people have thought the way that they've thought. There's a reason that truth has been revealed as it's been revealed. And there's a reason that, lies have been shown to be lies as well. You take your time.
And I want to say here that no one will ever have it held against them at the end of their lives for believing a lie.
If you do your best, you do your
believing
best.
Something that was not true. It will be held against you if it is proven to you and you acknowledge it as being true, but insist on believing the opposite anyway. That will be held against you.
Mm-hmm.
But for genuinely just believing something that is not true and having no idea that it wasn't true, the worst that's going to happen to you is you'll get to the pearly gates and St. Peter will tell you, oh yeah, this thing you thought was true was actually not true. And you'll kind of go, oh well.
Yep, like Aquinas with the Immaculate Conception.
Exactly.
No,
And he's still the greatest theologian who has ever lived. But I must point out that the only thing that is now a doctrine that he disagreed with is the one that it took the authority of the magisterium of the church to confirm.
This is true.
It is one that is not totally that is not really at all based in tradition, that it did actually take the authority of the church with some knowledge of tradition as well. Because Pius X used the authority of the chair of Peter to, I think his was the Assumption of Mary. That was the doctrine that he confirmed from the chair of Peter. I think the Immaculate Conception was one that it took a conclave of the church to define. So it was kind of like, yeah, that's the one thing that he disagreed with because he genuinely had no way of knowing better. And by his own reason, he didn't necessarily come to that point. Sure.
Mm-hmm.
No issue there. It's not going to be held against him. And he's a saint, so he's definitely in heaven.
Your job in this life is to pursue truth to the best of your ability.
Yeah.
And if you, like, we're all going to come up short of that. I'm probably going to be a material heretic. Not a formal one, hopefully, thank God, but a material one in some form or another, because there's something I'm going to believe that's not right.
At some point in your life. And you have a responsibility to learn truth and to learn the teachings of the church. You have a responsibility to that as a practicing Catholic.
Yep.
But I will always say, if I believe something, if I think something, I'll say, well, I believe this thing, and this is how I've come to it according to my own use of reason. But if I'm reading the catechism, and the catechism says the exact opposite thing, I'll be like, oh, well, I guess I was wrong. Because the catechism is not wrong.
Because a higher infallible authority above you is reasonably smarter than you.
And I am subordinating my own intellect and my will to that authority.
Mm-hmm.
It's what we should all do, and we shouldn't think ourselves more important or more intelligent than anybody else specifically because of any specific reason, whether we have letters in front of or behind our name.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have any letters at all. I just have a fancy piece of paper on the wall.
And the over pursuit of knowledge, like we've been talking about tonight, is more closely associated with the over pursuit of reason. But what's funny about that is that it's a wrong pursuit of reason, because
it's kind of interesting. It's created this sort of paradox because the more that people pursue knowledge, the less actual reason they have. And the more you talk to people that talk as though they know a lot of things, the less they seem to actually understand. Because reason is not knowledge. Reason is knowledge and understanding. You have to have both of them if you are to have wisdom.
Which is what
wisdom is
ultimately
applied
matters.
knowledge put to use.
Put to use properly.
Yes. Which is why wisdom is a virtue.
And if something is ultimately directed towards a lie, or towards something that is less good for you, either because of the thing you're pursuing or the degree to which you're pursuing it, then it cannot be wise. So over pursuing knowledge is not wise.
And these days, and I see this in a lot of different places, the over pursuit of knowledge leads to, like what we were talking about earlier, to that sort of irrational faith, which isn't really faith at all.
It's either irrational or it's just more closely associated with Nietzsche saying, like, why not untruth?
Right.
Which is one of the most destructive 3-word sentences ever uttered by a human.
as well as any other three-word sentence that came out of Nietzsche's mouth. It can equally be put right there with him. I see a lot these days, and these things are kind of linked. So there are the people that have succeeded in pursuing knowledge, and there are those who are pursuing knowledge. And there are those that don't really pursue knowledge. They just sort of try to absorb it, which is it's what happens most of the time when somebody goes onto the internet. So those who have succeeded in pursuing some knowledge are the academics and the intellectuals. And these are the people that have spent at least the last century, if not longer, trying to convince the rest of the world that they are the smartest people in the world, and that if you disagree with them, well, you're just not smart enough to understand my position. And a lot of this sort of, these are the people that came up with the IQ test. These are the people that, which by the way is basically a scam. There is no test that can tell you exactly how intelligent you are. The way that most IQ tests work is by testing your ability to recognize patterns, which being able to recognize a pattern better than somebody else doesn't make you smarter than somebody else. A chimpanzee can recognize a pattern.
It certainly doesn't make you wiser.
Yeah. I've taken an IQ test, and my IQ was maybe only slightly above average. I don't even really remember what it was. I think it was 140 something.
Well, that's more than just above average. I think average is about 100.
That's not that high above average. But all
I'm
it
pretty
was
sure.
like,
I feel like Jordan Peterson is 150. So in other words, you're really selling yourself short.
I don't know, and I don't really care, because I actually do think the whole thing is a scam designed to make people who think that they're smarter than everybody else look even smarter than everybody else. Because some of the dumbest things that I've ever heard uttered have come out of people with near 200 IQs. I'm pretty sure Bill Gates has an IQ of like 160 or 170. And he has said some of the dumbest things that I've ever heard uttered by a human mouth. So don't believe somebody's IQ in assigning of a number to somebody's intelligence, because that's not the proof of somebody's intelligence. By the way, I got that score on the IQ test mostly by guessing, and not even with educated guesses, because I didn't even understand the question half the time. You can bullshit your way into making everybody else think that you're smarter than you actually are.
In my experience, this is simply a perk of being homeschooled. You get very good at taking tests.
We get very good at taking tests, yes. And we learn the system of how to take the test. Because I remember when I was taking the course pre-SAT, and I don't live on the West Coast, so I don't need to, or I wasn't applying to any West Coast schools, so I didn't need to take the ACT. When I took the course pre-SAT, I remember being told, well, this course isn't really to teach you anything other than how to pass the test, or how to, work the test to get a high score. I'm like, well, that doesn't prove my knowledge. That doesn't prove how intelligent I actually am. That proves nothing. That proves that I can be trained to go over an obstacle course, which is basically all an SAT is. It's an intellectual obstacle course.
It teaches you that life is a game, and you're just supposed to play the game, which is only true to an extent. Only to an extent. It's not fundamentally what life is.
It's a very short one. It's a very short extent that life is a game is true. And one of the results of this is most academics and intellectuals are just really good con artists. They're just really good at making something sound intelligent. I'm saying, oh, well, I had really good SAT scores. Well, guess what? That means you know how to pass a test. That doesn't actually teach you anything.
Yeah.
Well, I have this piece of paper here that says that I'm smart. And there is, for some reason, a disproportionate number of people who have been convinced to just believe anything that comes out of those people's mouths. Fortunately, I think now there's sort of a shift in the other direction. But now there's a shift to that same thing in a different context. Like now people are going, oh, well, sure, I shouldn't just believe somebody, anything that comes out of this guy's mouth because he has a bunch of fancy letters after his name or whatever, because he's got listed such and such IQ, or because he's got, such and such achievement because this was his SAT or his ACT score or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And people are understanding that. But now, for a lot of people, there is sort of a shift to them using their own ability to reason and think critically to a short extent and going, I'm going to find somebody that I can trust and listen to. But then they find that person that they can trust and listen to and immediately just believe literally everything out of that person's mouth. So now you're doing the same thing, but this time it's only been fueled by a little bit of reason and a little bit of critical thinking.
Mm-hmm.
So,
which makes you dumber.
It makes you dumber. Basically, you don't have actual knowledge at that point. What you have is secondhand knowledge. It's what I'm going to start calling it now. It's secondhand knowledge, secondhand information, and hand-me-down ideas.
Which are fine to an extent, but like you need to think critically about them.
You do. You actually need to think about them and process them. And someone that I'm very close to, that I know, has this tendency almost to the point of it being an addiction, where there are these certain people that can say literally everything and anything, and I'm pretty sure these people can say literally anything, and he'll just believe them. Because he's already decided in his head in advance that these people are right. Now, it is people that he knows personally, and there's also a couple of online people that he just believes, and that's because these people that he knows personally that he has respect for follow these online people and believe them implicitly. And I never see any conversation I have with him about any of this. I can tell that he's just parroting the things that he's hearing. He's not actually thinking for himself. He's just believing every word that is coming out of these guys' mouths, not thinking about it, and just thinking, oh, well, this guy said it, so it must be right. So every time I talk to him about it, he just parrots it. And because he's not thinking for himself, I can't convince him otherwise. Like an example of this is someone that's also edging into dangerous anti-Semitism, which has been condemned by the church for a really, really long time. But for some reason, he thinks that whoever this guy is that he's listening to is smarter than the last 5 popes. And there's a couple of things that he believes that that don't gel with me, that I think about for more than 5 seconds. It's like, well, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Or I've already come up with a counter to it. One of them is that the Jewish people are cursed because they levied a curse upon themselves when they said, crucify him and we have no king but Caesar. They cursed themselves, and that can only be broken by baptism. Now
that's smart. There's an easy way to undo that one.
Forgive them, Father, for they know not what they are doing.
You don't even have to go that far, although that's
the curse was from their own lips, and they cursed themselves, but the forgiveness was from Christ's lips. So the only curse that can only be that they have upon them that can only be lifted by baptism is that of original sin. It's the same thing as literally anybody who's not baptized.
Didn't even have to go that far. Then this is giving this argument too much weight, but I'll just say this anyway. The definition of a curse is calling down evil on someone. Saying crucify him and we have no king but Caesar is not calling down evil on someone.
They also said his blood be upon our heads and on our children. which is in the gospel. Which is why you later go on to forgive them, Father, for they do not know what they are doing, which is directly from the mouths of God himself.
And all you need to counter that. So, yeah, good point.
Like, I don't know why I need to go further into this. The other thing, we all know that Israel is no friend to anybody but Israel as a country. This is kind of known knowledge at this point, especially with what's happened in the last couple of weeks. But Israel at least being declared as being primarily Jewish. Well, the Jews believe themselves to mostly be the biological descendants of Abraham. Well, another claim that I hear is, well, there was this study that was done, this biological study, and there is absolutely no one in the entire nation of Israel that has the blood of Abraham. The only people in the Middle East, or even really in the entire world with the blood of Abraham, are Palestinian Christians and Muslims. And I'm like, what? First of all, how do you even test that? I don't think we have Abraham's body anywhere.
Well, and second, it's useless information.
Yeah, it is useless information, but it's not even necessarily provable information. And whether or not it is, okay, who cares?
Even if it is provable,
the most that you can do with that is be anti-Zionist.
Even if it's provable, it's just a rabbit hole.
Yeah.
And that's what too much information and a lack of critical thinking can tend to do to somebody. It just sucks them down. And a line we've used in this podcast multiple times is, by their fruits you shall judge them. I have seen a number of people go down those rabbit holes with the way that they think about one thing or five things or more, whatever. I've been one of these people myself in the past. Part of the reason that I hate it so much now is because I know what that did to me, and I know what that does to other people, because I observe it in them. It makes you less of yourself. It makes you less friendly with others. It makes you less amiable. It makes you more anxious. It makes you more stressed out. It makes you more frustrating. It makes you less reasonable. It makes you less smart. It makes you less wise.
It makes you want to close yourself off to the entire rest of the world.
Yeah.
Because at that point, once you see maybe an evil confirmed in some place, and you start looking for evils elsewhere, you're going to find them. Because there's evil people in the world, and it's the fallenness of man. But if you then go down a rabbit hole and come to the conclusion of, well, the decline of Western civilization is the fault of Jews and Masons. If your answer to what is the fall, what is the reason for the decline of civilization, if your answer is literally anything but the fallenness of humanity, you're wrong.
Yeah, at absolute best, you have oversimplified the answer.
Yes.
And that's if you basically hit the nail on the head as best you could by ascribing the answer to one thing other than the fallenness of man. Like you said.
Exactly.
And there are so many other ways to not be as right as that.
So maybe a less hot button way to talk about this is this same guy that I've been talking about is part of the reason that I like to now like to say, don't give a review if you haven't seen the movie. Because I don't remember when you were with us or not. So I remember going to see Avengers Endgame in theaters and liking it. I thought it was enjoyable. I thought parts of it were actually excellent. Parts of it I got really excited about. But then I don't think it was that same year. I think it's at some point later on down the road. It might have been that same year. I don't know. I mentioned this movie to this guy, and then he proceeds to list all of the reasons why it's a bad movie, and then says, well, but I haven't seen it. I'm like, okay, so why have I been standing here and listening to you blather on for 20 minutes about why this movie that I enjoyed is bad? And half of what you said was esoteric nonsense anyway. And you got it from somebody else that had seen the movie and may not have even seen the entire movie. This is the other thing, is don't judge a movie until you've seen the entire thing. Because there's a lot of movies that you think are absolute garbage unless you see the last 10 minutes. There's also a lot of movies that you would think are just fantastic until you see the last 10 minutes. And it's just that you are now lecturing me because you supposedly know something that I don't know because you heard it from somebody else rather than going and figuring it out yourself. You're lecturing me about a movie that I have seen and you haven't, telling me why it's a bad movie.
Well, it's a symptom of, and I'm guilty of this too, but it's a symptom of we have too much knowledge. If there's too many things for you to pay attention to, then, well, your amount of time in the day doesn't change. The amount of brain cells and cognitive power that you have doesn't change. You're more limited with what you can do with them. And so you are pigeonholed into making worse judgments than you would otherwise. Judgments with more assumptions in them than you might otherwise. And not that you wouldn't necessarily assume otherwise, because see aforementioned point about the fallenness of man, but you're more prone to it. If you have fewer things cluttering your mind, if you have less noise in your head, then you are more free to more carefully examine that opinion, to watch the whole movie, or
Yes.
use that metaphor for something else, and then make a more careful judgment.
And actually think about it.
Yep.
So, for context, yesterday my wife and I, or not really for context, but as an example, yesterday my wife and I went to see the new Superman movie in the theater because we had something that we wanted to do. And I will avoid giving spoilers at this point, at this juncture. There are times when I purposely avoid reviews, especially now, because now a movie, especially a comic book based movie, comes out and everybody expects it to be woke immediately. And I know James Gunn is kind of a liberal. He's not excessively woke, and he doesn't lecture people in his films. That's not the vibe I've gotten from any James Gunn film that I've ever watched previously. And he just seemed like the kind of guy that would do the character and do the story justice. And he did. I thoroughly enjoyed the movie. I think it's probably one of the better Superman movies. And it's going to be a hot take, and I'm going to make a lot of people mad, but I think it was a better Superman movie than Man of Steel. But we'll get into that later on. But I deliberately didn't watch a lot of reviews, even from sources that I trusted. Or people that had opinions that I trusted. Or even from necessarily Catholic sources. Because I want to have my own opinion of the film formed. And I trust my own conscience to be well formed enough to be able to make a proper judgment about whether or not it's a good film. And again, way too many people just listen to negative reviews. And they'll, not to say that reviews can't be an indication. I had heard that I hadn't really heard anything about it. Like, all I knew about it was that there were some people saying it was woke, and other people that were saying, actually, the best reviews that I had ever read of it was I had started to watch a review that was saying that the new Superman was kind of woke a little bit. But then I'm scrolling through the comments and I'm seeing people like, no, I didn't get that at all. So the review itself was from somebody who is immersed in modern American politics and gets up every morning expecting to find woke things everywhere. And at times falls victim to this. Well, if an idea isn't completely far right, then it's exceedingly woke. Like there are a lot of philosophies that are genuinely Catholic that to a lot of people in this country now would seem woke. Of what modern wokeness actually is. They're not, because Catholicism is the actual genuine middle ground between opposing opinions, because you know why? It's a virtue, which is not an opposition to one vice. It is the midway point on a pendulum between two opposite vices. The only issue is, so if being Catholic is the actual middle ground, the issue is that the current that is the genuine middle. The American political center is to the left several degrees of that. So you can technically be on the American political right and still not be in the genuine center.
Mm-hmm.
But that's also a topic for a later time. But like I said, I didn't get any woke vibes from the movie at all. So you can go with my promise that you'll probably enjoy yourself. And it actually made me like Superman. I didn't like Superman before, but it is a good Superman.
All right.
It is Superman, in my opinion, done in the best way possible.
We all tend to read our own biases into things. And when someone has too much of that bent towards finding something bad in something, it's just another example of bad bias. Like you're not getting the right vibes out of it.
And I was also going in kind of expecting to find like, oh, well, it's Superman, he's from Krypton, so, there's going to be a lot of anti-immigration stuff, and, the director doesn't really care for Trump all that much, so I'm probably going to find a lot of anti-Trump. There was the only thing that was mildly to the left there was two things. There's one kind of weak jab at the president that you only will really catch if you're looking for it.
Hmm.
And is slightly emphasized because it's something that's repeated in the scene. And then the other is that Superman has a sort of, not really monologue, but almost a speech that he gives that's a little fluffy at the very end. A little fluffy and a little bit corny. But that's as to the left as it goes. Otherwise, it is a good movie.
Fair enough.
Superman is good, and more importantly, he is just a man. But I think that was probably applicable at this point, because I could have just sort of leaned back and listened to everybody fight about it and then gone, well, I may as well just not go see it because, these people say it's bad and these people say, oh, it's great and wonderful, but I don't trust the opinion of the people that are saying it's great and wonderful. I more trust the opinion of people who are saying it was bad. But just the regular people in the comments section of the interview were saying, like, no, I thought it was pretty good. I enjoyed it. That's who I believed, actually, more than anything, because that's just regular people who can probably think for themselves. And they just went in and they just like, no, I enjoyed the movie. It was good.
There's something to that. One of the philosophies that I've adopted in the past year or so is something I call the fog of the internet, adapted from the fog of war. And the idea being, so many people act, to some of the stuff we were talking about earlier, so many people look at a situation that's not within their sphere of influence. It's not really something they can control. They just hear about it on the news. There's no way that they can reasonably know everything that's going on or everything that went into it. And yet they form these snap judgments like we were saying before.
Yeah.
So, and we all know of practical examples of that. So, just one I'll offer up right now. I'm already forgetting the name of the document, but there was a church document that came out within the past, year, 18 months? And it was about blessings.
Oh, I remember this one.
Yeah. I can't remember the name, but
I don't remember what it's called, but I know what one you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah. And this document got a lot of bad press or controversial press, shall we say,
So you
because
got you
it
got
seemed
too much bad press and the wrong kind of good press.
to say that the church was okay um, with blessing gay couples, which is not something you can ever bless. At least that was the impression that many people drew from it. And then there were Catholic apologists that were saying, okay, no, that's not actually what this says. It's being much more careful and such. So a little bit of time, during this, an event that my Catholic young adult group ran was a discussion and discipleship event, we called it. And we've done those before, and we've discussed different things, but we chose to discuss this document. So I read the entire thing to prep for that, word for word, which immediately, means I did more than 99% of people. More than 99% of people. But I read the thing word for word. I knew what the detractors had said. I knew what the apologists had said. And my bent was the church is right in what they say, but I say that as a man of faith. But when I read this document, it was one of the most beautiful documents I've ever read. It was eloquent. It was merciful. It was caring. It was pastoral. It was everything you would want the church to be. Because there are people that need blessings. What is a blessing? Can I ask God to bless this person? Of course I can ask God to bless this person. It's different than blessing the sinful actions they're committing.
Yes.
And you can't get those confused. And you can't give scandal. You can't make it look like you're getting them confused.
Yeah.
But you can absolutely bless them. And with regards to avoiding scandal, that document repeated again and again that you could not give scandal, that you could not use this to bless gay couples, bless irregular marriages.
You can bless the couple, you can't bless the union.
Exactly. So a priest, a reasonable priest cannot read that document and therefore conclude, at least if he's using his reason rightly, he's not going to conclude, yeah, so I'm going to find the gay couple at the airport terminal in front of everybody, and I'm going to go up in front of them and give them a blessing. Bad idea. Don't do that.
Yeah, no,
the optics are terrible. But if it was in private, and you bless them in such a way where you are not blessing what they're doing, but you are just asking the Lord for, His grace to come upon them, may they grow closer to Him. What's wrong with that? Like, I compared that to a father looking at his children, making a mess of the house. Like his, one of his sons is beating up another one of his sons, and it's not going well. You could say, as a father in that situation, Lord, bless Thomas. Please, make him a great son of yours one day. He's really messing up right now. Like, that would be totally fine. And no one in their right mind would say that that's not fine.
Yeah.
Because you're not praising his conduct. You're just blessing him, as anybody should. So that's a reasonable interpretation of the thing, actually looking at how it's read. The sad thing was that it was so badly interpreted that there was a bunch of controversy when there shouldn't have been, and the church had to issue at least two follow-ups to it that were not really clarifications, just reiterating what they'd said again. And they kind of were saying it. Like, I remember reading part of the last one, at least the last one at the time, and
it didn't do as good a job saying it as the first one did.
Well, it did a fine job. There was a tone of exasperation in it, though.
like we told you twice now.
We told you. Will you finally get it? We're saying one thing, we're not saying the other. You can't really argue. And even then, there was like one, I'm forgetting exactly, but like one section of the church that the church gave a dispensation to basically not follow the document. But the only reason for that was because of a definition of terms. Like, they believed fundamentally that the word blessing was something different. And the church was fine with that and basically said, well, if that's what you believe a blessing is, then no, this doesn't apply to you.
Yeah, if blessing means approval to you, then no,
Exactly.
that's totally fine. You don't have to give them blessings. But I
Yeah.
think one of the better ways that I've heard it described is, so say you have a same sex couple living in your neighborhood, which I do. If their house burns down,
We're gonna go help them.
I'm gonna go help them. I'll help them rebuild. If one of them is caught in the fire and there's no firemen, if I have the guts to, I'll go in and save him.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not gonna stand there and pontificate and basically make myself seem better than these two who are living in sin, because really, technically, I'm not. I'm affected by original sin too. Even though I'm baptized, I had the stain taken away, but the effects still remain.
Mm-hmm.
Also, I have no idea whether or not these guys are baptized. That's not. It's not really any. It's my business, but also not my business to ask at this
Mm-hmm.
particular point. But if their house burns down, yeah, I'm gonna go. I'm gonna go help them, and I'll
Mm-hmm.
probably go and pray with them. I'll say, "Hey, can I pray with you guys?" Say, "I'd like to pray for you."
But you're going to be more blinded to that if you just suck yourself down a rabbit hole.
If you suck yourself down a rabbit hole and basically give in to the, what's the word? Well, give in to the idea that any interaction that I have with them, because I am a Christian and very obviously one, would be scandalous, then that'll actually wind up having the opposite effect. I can guarantee you everyone
Mm-hmm.
in my neighborhood knows that we're Catholic and how Catholic we are. We have a Divine Mercy image and a Sacred Heart flag and a Life Runners uh, yard sign out in front of our house. It's not a secret.
Yeah, if they can still critically think, they may well know.
If you have two brain cells to rub together, you should be able to tell. But I'll still wave at my neighbors when they wave, and I'll let my kids wave at them when they wave.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't bother me. And it really shouldn't. You should be able to live in peace with people who are living in sin.
We shun wickedness, but not necessarily the wicked. Hate the
Yes.
sin, love the sinner.
Because it's not you that I have a problem with, and because I have a problem with the way you're living, it doesn't mean I have a problem with you.
Mm-hmm. This is true.
Which hopefully more and more people start to understand. But that's what the actual Catholic opinion is.
But it takes
But I
wisdom.
think,
To the point of this podcast, it takes wisdom and it doesn't take knowledge. Like you said, having a high IQ
yeah.
is not the point.
And unfortunately, we live in a world that, thinks that has too many people that think they need to know as much as they can about as many things as they can.
Mm-hmm.
There's way too many people that know a little bit about a lot of things. Like, there's that old saying, I only know enough to be dangerous. Well, when you only know enough to be dangerous about something, that is exactly what you are. So you should know enough about a lot of things to be able to have a conversation, because that's a good thing. We lost the art of conversation. People need to know how to have a conversation at the very least, and should know enough about what they're talking about to be able to ask the proper questions and keep the conversation alive and going.
Mm-hmm.
Even if the question is, I have no idea what that is, will you please explain it to me in the simplest possible terms, and we'll go from there.
Exactly, because like the prudent knowledge, the wise knowledge present there is not just I know what I know about this, but also I know what I don't know about this.
Nobody wants to admit to not knowing everything. And I know people like this too. It's a lot of people that don't want to admit to not knowing all of the information. It's the people that they have this desire to be the smartest guy in the conversation and think that everything needs to be taught to somebody else. which is incredibly and dangerously arrogant, for one thing. And usually you just piss people off when you do that,
Mm-hmm.
because you ultimately just wind up talking down to everybody, especially when it's clear to most people you don't really know what you're talking about.
Yeah, you make a fool
You
of yourself.
probably just know a lot of buzzwords and talking points that you've heard from somebody else, and because this guy has said it, you've decided it's true, so you are now going to tell me, because now you want to help me,
Mm-hmm.
even when it's something that I have a degree in.
I mean, I have this bent in me too. I think we all do. See earlier
Everybody
point about
does
the
to an
fallenness
extent,
of, yeah, the
because
fallenness of man.
nobody wants to be wrong. Nobody wants to say something that's incorrect. And nobody wants to not know something. I think that's what it is. I think we more have a fear of not knowing things.
But all you're doing with that is you're glorifying knowledge.
Exactly.
You know,
Because knowledge for
you're
knowledge's sake is pointless.
yeah. And when you glorify knowledge, like you glorify IQ. I mean, IQ is what IQ ultimately measures is just the ability to do complex tasks, or at least think through complex tasks. Fine.
It
That will
doesn't
make you
even mean you know anything.
successful in the modern world and business, which is why it's so highly correlated with success. But success is not defined therein as wisdom. You want to know who the highest IQ person is in the universe that isn't God or Mary? Satan.
Yeah.
The most intelligent of the angels, and yet the dumbest.
Is the one that's fallen.
Yeah.
And did probably the stupidest thing that has ever been done in all of human history.
Mm-hmm.
And again, Martin Luther
are
probably
you?
had an insanely high IQ.
Yeah.
But he also
And
destroyed Christendom in a matter of years.
and
Not
one of
even
the rules of
decades.
spiritual combat
In a matter of
is
months, actually, he had completely annihilated Christendom.
yeah, because it's destructive. One of the rules of spiritual combat is don't talk with Satan one-on-one, and he'll win. This is also why debates are only so limited.
Always bring a friend.
You are not going to win an argument against him. He's much more intelligent than you.
Yeah.
But he's still wrong. Why is he wrong? Because truth is not found in knowledge. Because truth is not found in IQ. Truth is found in truth, in wisdom.
And I think one of the things that we can kind of take away that we should always pursue truth, goodness, and beauty in as many forms as possible, because they're just good things to have. And you don't necessarily need to be able to talk with anybody about anything. At the very least, like I said, you should just know how to have a conversation.
Yeah.
And then over the course of the conversation, you will learn enough about said thing to have maybe another conversation at another time.
This is true.
Brian Regan has a great bit about this. It's one of my favorite bits of his. Where he's like, I go to parties and I'm not usually the smartest guy in the room, and I don't know how to be honest about it. I don't know how to walk up to people and go, I don't know what you are talking about. May I still stand here? No, instead I have to make up something stupid. So I go up to this one group and they're talking about art. And so, of course, I have to say, oh, I love art. And now you can't take those words back.
Yep. You immediately know when you've said it, and they say one half intelligent question back to you that you're out of your league.
If you don't know how to have a conversation and can't be honest in conversation, that's what you wind up with. Is exactly that Brian Regan bit.
Mm-hmm.
Ultimately, while you should be able to have a conversation, it is still better to know a lot about a small number of things than to know a little bit about a lot of things. Because what happens when you only know a little bit about a lot of things? You don't have time to sit back and realize that you only know a little bit about a lot of things. So you then think that you know everything about all of those things.
Mm-hmm.
Modern education is partly guilty of this, because they say, by the time you turn 18, you should have learned everything you need for life. ever.
Hmm.
And then you go to
Yeah.
college, and then you specialize. Not really. No, people with only a basic high school understanding of history know basically nothing about history. Because understanding history actually means knowing how to research history. It doesn't mean knowing a ton of facts. It doesn't mean knowing who won what battle in what year. There are only 2 dates in all of history that people need to have memorized. Christmas Day of the year 800, when Charlemagne was crowned Holy Roman Emperor, and July 4th, 1776.
There's the proud American. Not that you were ever not there. You've never not been there.
I'll say that's at least the second one is most important for people in the U.S. If you're in another country, I'm sure your country has another favorite date.
You did forget the most important one, though.
If you're in France, it's probably June 6, 1944.
Most important one is Good Friday of the year 33.
Easter Sunday of the year 33.
The entire Triduum. Fine.
But there's no actual date on that. We can probably wind up extrapolating it. Like, for example, tradition says that it was probably March 25th.
Fair enough.
For a lot of theological and philosophical reasons from the Middle Ages that we'll have to go into later. But Good Friday was probably on March 25th, which means that the resurrection was probably the 27th.
You shouldn't hear us talk about this and be like, well, I have to learn everything about history. No. And wait, I don't know enough about history because I'm one of the people that only knows a little bit. So what do? You only need to know what you need to know for the good of you, your station in life, and your family. Which probably isn't much. It probably is very small compared to what a good historian should know.
You should know how to do your job, whatever your job is.
Mm-hmm.
Which hopefully is something that you are good at and have talent for and have a love of.
Mm-hmm.
In the most ideal circumstance. You should know how to do your job. You should know how to maintain a home. But, I mean, if you rent, you don't even necessarily need to know how to fix anything.
True.
And there's no shame in renting.
But none of this is,
But, like, if you own a home, you should know a little bit about plumbing. You should know a little bit about electricity. You should know a little bit about carpentry.
Yeah.
Just from a frugality standpoint, little things, it's better to know how to do yourself than to have to hire a professional to come in and do.
And why? Because this is an example of analyzing it from the perspective of what is actually good.
It also helps you to better know yourself and know what your limits actually are. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I don't have time to become an expert plumber or electrician or carpenter. I can know a little bit, but only to a certain extent. And once it's beyond that, then I have to go and hire the professional.
Yep.
Like, okay, yeah, at that point, yeah, go hire the professional. Like, I had a really bad drain clog at one point, and I couldn't figure out what it was. Like, my brain was scrambling. Like, is there pipe damage? Is there, like, what is the issue here? And like, it was a sink and a bathtub that were both really badly backing up. And then my dad came over, brought his drain snake, which I think is like 20 feet. But, in plumbing terms, that's basically nothing. And we use it, and it doesn't do anything. And so at that point, my dad's like, well, I'd call a plumber now. And we're like, oh, okay, well, okay. So we call a plumber, and there's one right down the road. So he popped over. He was here in 15 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
And he comes in. And the only reason that we needed the plumber was because he had a really long drain snake. His was like 100 foot. And he managed to get the clog out. Fortunately, it wasn't anything major. It was just a couple of clogs in the drain.
So what do you need to know to succeed in life? this is a reflection I have. You just need to know enough to be a good member of community. Because community is one of the most human things and beautiful things about being human. You don't need to know enough to be the community.
You need to know enough to be the best. I hate the phrase to be the best you, but you need to know enough to be as good as you can possibly be in your current state.
Hey, the reason cliches exist is because they're true.
Yes, I know, but some of them are so overused that they make me throw up in my mouth a little bit if I try to say them. That's just because I'm an asshole. So,
but there's wisdom there. Like, I don't, to return to my internet example and tie in with all of this, I don't need to cast my gaze out over the entire world through the internet or whatever means and say, oh, I need to be the next this investment guy, or I need to be the next this sports guy, or I need to be the next this hunter guy, or so on. All I got to do is be the best version of Dominic, because that's who I was made to be. And if the knowledge I'm consuming does not serve that, then I ought not be consuming it. Same goes for everybody else, but know, listeners, that this is an indictment of myself. But
so yeah, and you don't need to know necessarily what's happening halfway across the world. You don't need to know the geopolitical situation at any given point in time. You should know kind of familiarly. You should be kind of familiar with the American political situation or the political situation of whatever country you belong to. And maybe know a little bit about its relations with its biggest allies / enemies. But again, really only to be conversant and only to make an informed decision about when you're voting. Other than that, you don't need to try to be an expert in it. You don't need to be constantly bringing it up in parties because, let's be honest, nobody likes talking about politics at parties. Except for the people that think that they know better than everybody else.
It's not an uplifting conversation.
No, it's usually never pleasant. It's usually not pleasant. Usually never is an oxymoron.
We got a lot of oxymorons here.
Well, we're both morons, so that's, different kinds of morons.
Or rather, we sometimes always allow oxymorons here.
But really the only thing you should know the most about is what's going on immediately around you. In your hometown, in your neighborhood. And they say that people can't see the forest for the trees. Well, the only tree that matters is the one that's right in front of you. And you're never going to get to the other side of the forest unless you pay attention to each individual tree that is right in front of you. So,
and your journey from the noise to this better pursuit of knowledge, it's going to be marked with anxiety, at least initially, because your body is going to be screaming out, well, no, I got to keep the hamster wheel going. But what I have found is
but the hamster will be happy.
Well, but he's not happy. He can't be happy. He is a beast of anxiety inside you, and it is literally impossible for him to be happy. Speaking from experience. But as you pursue this, one of the things you're going to find, speaking from experience, is a greater sense of peace and a greater sense of purpose. I'm like, no, I actually am becoming the person I was designed to be. I'm fumbling along the way brilliantly because, of course, I'm human and fallenness of humanity, but it's working. And I wish that on anybody listening.
With that, I think we can leave everybody with two things. First of which, think for yourself and make informed, logical decisions. And be okay with not knowing everything. And as I said earlier, when you only know enough to be dangerous, that's exactly what you are.
Mm-hmm.
Don't be dangerous to yourself or to anybody else.
Sounds good.
And with that, we end.
Have a good evening, everyone.
Please join us next time.